So a couple of weeks ago, Piers Morgan hosted a debate between libertarian Tomi Lahren and orthodox debater Andrew Wilson, what he's mainly known for. And he's known for being a skilled debater. He's known for being quick on his feet, a bit edgy at times. And Tomi Lahren, while social conservative in appearance, may not be socially conservative in a holistic manner. So this was a debate, and this was a debate that Piers Morgan decided to host after the Netflix series Adolescence, because Adolescence brought forward a debate about, Andrew Tate, the magosphere, toxic masculinity, this whole sphere that exists, the brosphere, etc., etc. And it's brought forward a debate amongst conservative circles about the manosphere, the bro vote, as we've currently had, and this kind of friction. I'm not really a fan of civil wars, so I don't really like what's been going on here. But essentially, you've got a civil war between what we seem to be getting, which is millennial conservative men and millennial conservative women having different views of the world, and this is becoming a clashing culture war from within, which I don't particularly like, but, we are where we are. And as a simple observer of these particular facts, and, we're just all observers. In any particular decade, in any particular place, that there aren't that many people who actually matter in the grand scheme of things, but I think this is noteworthy, and I think it's something that we should pay attention to. If we're able to acknowledge the culture war, the civil culture war before it happens within the conservative movement, then hopefully we'll be able to resolve it in some way. So we're going to have a look at it and see what the debate was about. Now, remember, Andrew Wilson and Tomi Lahren, I don't always agree 100% on, but, it's just an interesting debate, and I think we should view it. So here we go.
Adolescence on Netflix is currently the biggest show in the world. The drama about a 13-year-old misogynist who kills a teenage girl has been seen by 25 million people so far and was raised by the British Prime Minister in Parliament.
With our children, I've got a 16-year-old boy and a 14-year-old girl, and it's a very, very good documentary to watch, or drama. This violence carried out by young men, influenced by what they see online, is a real problem. It's abhorrent, and we have to tackle it.
It's actually a fictional story, Prime Minister, not a documentary, but as the Prime Minister referenced, it tells the story of young boys who are radicalised by content online. There are references to the manosphere, the Matrix, incels, and red pills. Andrew Tate gets a name check. And that part of the show has sparked an outpouring of commentary about the abject horrors of the internet and the crisis of male role models.
Banged by a girl, you sausage.
You're not getting it.
What am I not getting?
Dad, you're not reading what they're doing. It's a call to action by the manosphere. 80% of women are attracted to 20% of men. You must trick them because you'll never get them in a normal way.
Well, The Guardian summed up the general tone of the reporting with a headline that said, from the police to the Prime Minister, how adolescence is making Britain face up to toxic masculinity. But is it really? Can it not just be a successful drama that references popular culture, as so many do? Critics of the show say it's another version of the same man-bashing narrative that gave rise to the so-called manosphere in the first place. Well,
to be fair, this does bring into a wider point of why is it always British politics that seems to influence American politics? I understand, like, there is a particular relationship between American conservatism and British conservatism, but I never understood why the Brits have an outsized influence on American politics. It just seems strange. Like, so there's this little Netflix show created by a bunch of left-wingers, The Guardian gets hold of it, etc., etc. And then it becomes national news on American news networks. But of course, Piers Morgan has a 1 foot in America and 1 foot in Britain, so he's able to translate what's going on in Britain and America and be kind of the in-between person. He spent, what was it, like, his claim to fame at the moment was he spent 10 years on The Apprentice with Donald Trump, so he's milking it for everything it's worth. But it is good of him told to opposing opinions, which is something you don't see often now, so that's obviously a good thing. And I applaud him for doing that. But yeah, I think this is always overblown. I think the only reason why it's overblown for me, at least when it comes to Netflix and shows of a left-wing nature, which 99% of them are, Hollywood has always been a left-wing place. I mean, it's almost a cliche for conservatives, social conservatives, to moan about Hollywood. And, go back to the days of McCarthy, etc. Ooh, those liberal Marxist Hollywood types. So this has been, conservative 101 rhetoric forever. So it's quite interesting to see how they both approach this. So I imagine the tip of the conversation, at least in Piers Morgan's introduction, is this show and the effects. So I'm going to be looking for, A, has anybody seen this show, and B, does anyone talk about it? But I think they're bringing in wider themes, etc., etc. But yeah, I guess we'll see. But yeah, a left-wing show or left-wing media company creating a TV show, news article, blog, etc., bashing some right-wing subculture is not particularly new or inspiring or insightful. I don't think they're coming at a place of trying to learn from it or maybe understand what the causes are or the consequences. Now, I don't really know that much about the manosphere, but the manosphere itself seems to be encapsulated with Andrew Tate, but of course it goes back even further. Just merging about 5 or 6 different subcultures into this one particular one, going back to chat-up artists, etc., etc. I once had a subcultural diagram of all the different subcultures, so I was able to, map them all out. But yeah, this is quite an interesting development in the culture war, but it's not really a culture war, is it? This is not particularly what I'm interested in. A left-wing show having a go at, those, those 4chan types. But what I am interested in was the internal civil war amongst conservatives, which I have noticed, apart from just the tech right and the tech bros and the Theo bros, I guess, if you want to put it another way, is one between social conservative millennial men and social conservative millennial women. And this debate is just interesting part of the culture war. Even if it is an internal one, it's still interesting, or at least interests me. So, yeah, I don't know how much I added there.
To debate all this is the host of The Crucible, Andrew Wilson, the radio host, James Barr, the host of Tomi Lahren is Fearless on Outkick, Tomi Lahren, and the host of The Determined Society, Sean Fretcher. Welcome to all of you. Andrew Wilson, let me start with you, because look, I've got 3 sons, 31, 27, 24. I think I brought them up to respect women, to not behave in a misogynist way, and to behave in a pretty decent way generally. But I'm also aware that they've grown up in an era when the likes of Andrew Tate and others have become increasingly dominant in the way that a lot of impressionable young men start to think and view women. And for all that Andrew Tate can say that is positive about getting fit and being successful and confident and so on, there's indisputably a hardcore streak of misogyny that runs through his veins, which I think has been quite damaging to young men. So I'm not all in either way here, but I can certainly see the arguments. Where do you sit?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that so I watched the show, and it just goes through a typical feminine view, right? So all of these things are always through the prism of the feminine. So young boys, they don't do well in school. They don't do well.
By the way, when Piers Morgan was making that particular framing, I think he's talking about it from a personal point of view. So he's obviously saying that him, an upper middle class, kind of classical liberal gentleman that you often get in Britain, with what seems to be a stable marriage, 3 adult children. I'm guessing at least one is male, or else he wouldn't be talking about this in such a personal way. He's talking about it in the terms of danger. And I don't know if you noticed, but the debate in Britain is about how much you should censor the internet. And the people you are censoring is not normally left-wing types, but is normally conservatives. And this is why I have always recommended to, conservatism, is that the one place you can't ignore right now is you can ignore Hollywood, you can ignore the oil industry, you can ignore banking. You can even ignore the bureaucracy up to a point. But you cannot ignore Silicon Valley. Just about every single innovation in the future will come out of there. They'll probably automate Hollywood, in all fairness. And if you haven't noticed, like AI is getting built in there and et cetera, et cetera. So, you can just tell an AI, make a video of Donald Trump like climbing a tree or something, and he's climbing a tree. Yeah, and the videos are getting longer and longer until eventually you'll be able to make 90-minute videos. And, I think it's good. It democratizes creativity, the cultural spaces, which is good for conservatives. We don't own Hollywood. We don't, the best we've ever done in the past 90 years is just make rather poorly made Christian movies and the odd autobiographical film like the Reagan movie or Thatcher, which is not made by conservatives for conservatives, but is made by liberals through a framing of liberalism to liberals. All right.
In school because it's all programmed for the feminine. Stay still, fold your hands, right? Be quiet. Boys are rambunctious. They like to beat each other up. They like to be mischievous. They like to break things. They like to do that kind of stuff. There's no outlet for them to do that stuff. Their teachers are all women, right? There's basically all masculinity is now considered toxic. Basically all of it. The same women who are getting their double shot of espresso on the way over to the school they're about to teach at. They're 24 years old. Sometimes they're banging their own students, right? Hilariously enough. And then these people go out to Parliament. The same women will go to Parliament. They vote to send men off to war to stab each other in the face with bayonets. And you're concerned.
You are going to get this quite a lot, but the gentleman to the, opposite, the guy in the middle, I'm not sure what his name is, but you're going to get this quite a lot, which is just him just doing like side eyes and him just going kind of face. I've met quite a few people like this. They're, I used to get a lot of them in university and college. They're quite. You can tell they don't interact with the working class that much. I don't think, but anyway, I think Andrew Tate made a good point. He tries to be edgy. I've noticed he makes good point, edgy point, and then everyone reacts to that, which is kind of a Trumpian type of way. So that's just Andrew Wilson. That's just what he does. But yeah, the subject is Andrew Tate, and the only reason why Andrew Wilson actually has a positive view of Andrew Tate, or at least he's willing to defend him. He says, well, the only reason people are going to him is because, we're not all Christians like myself. Kind of reproach. It's not quite like that, but it's not too far off it. From what I know of his views, he's a orthodox Christian debater. I know his wife is supposedly meant to be quite a good conservative writer. I've not read any of her stuff, but anyway. So,
concerned about toxic masculinity. It cracks me up. It's like the brutal savagery of men is a necessary precondition for society to exist, and we just kind of pretend like it's not. And this show should actually be an indictment on the feminine rather than the masculine, because basically masculinity is just punished everywhere all the time, nonstop. It's no wonder guys like Andrew Tate get so famous in these spaces. I mean, what's the alternative? The alternative is everything must be feminine, tone policing, nonsense like this. It's ridiculous.
All right, James Barr, you were laughing, but I don't think you'd enjoy
crazy.
what you're hearing.
No, I mean I don't think you've seen the show. Episode 2 is shot entirely in a school. I didn't see one of the female teachers drinking a double shot of espresso at all. None of the teachers were flirting with students. There were male teachers as well. I don't think you're describing the show here. I think you're describing your own insecurities or agenda.
Yeah, so this doesn't contend with the argument. Like, do you understand that I'm making an argument, an indictment of society itself, based around my ideas that I'm seeing from this show? That's what I'm actually doing. So if you could contend with the fact that male savagery is necessary for the security of a nation, and that
I think the guy in the middle did actually make a very good point, which was to stay on track, discuss the show, blah blah blah. That's why everyone there, but it's already gone sidetracked. Of course, Piers Morgan, as per usual, doesn't just lets it free reign. So Andrew Wilson obviously has gone into the show, and I know he does organise his thoughts and his debating style quite well. So I think he's done this for the reason of trying to make it about grander themes, and he generally has the same 20 or 30 talking points, I've noticed. So it'll be quite interesting to see what is. I think it was probably a wise choice, which was for him to kind of say, shows are generally a reflection of society, and we are a reflection of those shows. So instead of the show having legitimacy, we're the ones with legitimacy because we're the ones it's talking about. So it's talking at us and not to us. I think that's the general point he's trying to make. And of course, I don't know if Andrew Wilson would call himself a part of the manosphere, although I do know he's done some masculine debates with other writers types. So I think he's like the proxy for the defense of the generalized manosphere. I don't agree with Andrew Wilson on everything. Sometimes I think he's too moderate on things. Sometimes I don't think he goes far enough. So yeah, but that's not the interesting part. The interesting part was the internal disputing, which is going to come on along later.
Women will indeed vote in the future in parliaments to send men off to war to stab each other in the face at 18 years old with bayonets. Perhaps you can contend with that before we start, getting into, well, tone policing is actually good and toxic masculinity is actually bad. It's like, I think there needs to be a little bit more toxic masculinity, or what you consider to be toxic masculinity.
So once again, I know I have to keep stopping and starting for Andrew Wilson, but he does pick his words very, very carefully. And I've noticed that one of the reasons he's done this is, I think what he wanted to achieve was to, if you're a leftist and the proxy rightist is making an edgy point, you've just got to ignore it. You've just got to ignore it, move on, because what he's trying to get them to do is he's trying to get them to ad hominem attacks. So he'll say something like, well, for maybe things should be even more toxic. Maybe we should have... Yeah, but what he's trying to do there was he was defining terms, which is... I know he does read a lot of material on debating, but he's trying to define terms by saying, what is toxic masculinity? Can you give me a definition? Blah, blah, blah. And then he's going to shift the debate over later, which you'll see in a minute. But yeah, it's the... Remember, when I was in college and university, I used to do politics, and while sometimes I took part in the debates, for the most part, I was just moderating them. So I was kind of doing the Piers Morgan thing here. And you don't want to put in too much, but you want to make sure everyone stays on track. So if you're wondering why I'm a bit obsessed with like where the direction and the debating style is going, is because I've seen this quite a lot. So, so define terms, make your case is generally the thing. And I think he's done that at the beginning, opening phase, which I guess he kind of knew that it'd be 3-on-1 or 3.5-on-1. Piers Morgan is just happy to get controversy, just to get the viewership up.
Well, great, good for you.
Nothing.
I'm glad you think so.
Nothing.
No, I mean, I just don't need to argue with that because
you just unlocked. You just unlocked. You got nothing.
Yeah, I think I do see this quite a lot, which is the person in the center should have, prepared a little bit better. Andrew Wilson has the same 20 or 30 talking points, and he has the same structure of debating, and he's gone in with particular argumentations. And I don't know, it just felt like, with all the technology that's available today that wasn't available when I was in college. I mean, I've heard some debaters now that they're making AI say, all right, let's say I was debating X person, and then you give the AI particular speeches, and then you say, okay, make a speech of speeches. Just say what are the top 10 arguments he normally comes up with by frequency. All right, and what's the best responses to them? And people just use AI now for debating, or at least practice debating. So I'm not saying make an Andrew Wilson AI bot so you can debate him better, but they should do something, jeez. But yeah, that was a poor response.
You're making up.
You
an
do
agenda
seem
that
unusually
I've not said
by that.
I've not said anything. I haven't literally said nothing about.
James, you were literally rendered silent. Like you had no way of responding.
I'll tell you what, you can't argue with a completely illogical argument that had, I've not made any of the
It's a logical argument. You may not agree with it.
I've not made any of the comments.
Making a perfectly logical argument
that you are firing at me. None of those comments are things I've said or believe in.
All right, I want to bring Tomi in, because Tomi, you've got a very interesting perspective, I think. You've talked about something different. You call it the pussification of men, which is a great phrase. I'd love you to just explain what you mean by that. But
see, now, at this point, Andrew Wilson is not, nodding his head in agreement with Tomi Lahren, but instead he's like, okay, yeah, kind of a sarcastic nod to that.
Also, you're not a fan of Andrew Tate or the influence he has. So that makes you, I think, an interesting commentator in this area. So just explain, first of all, the pussification of men.
All right, Piers. Well, I think, and I can't see you all, so forgive me if I'm incorrect here, but I think I'm the only female on this panel.
Correct.
So I'm really anxious to weigh in. Okay, so I think over the last probably 10 years, there has been what I call the pussification of men. It was everything should be about your emotions and your feelings, and men were emasculated, and this whole concept of toxic masculinity warped the minds of a lot of young men. And they felt masculine, they wanted to be masculine, but society was telling them they should be softer, that it was being toxically masculine if you wanted to play sports and chop wood and go to war. And so men were so emasculated and so beat down that then there was this revolution of what was actually toxic masculinity, the Tate brothers and others, which I feel as a female that doesn't represent true masculinity. That to me represents douchebaggery. And as a woman, I want a strong man who is a protector and a provider that will go to war if need be, that will protect me, protect my family, make money.
You see the other two males nodding along, and this is the point where I think Andrew Wilson is starting to hear her arguments, and what she's almost doing is feeding into the debate, and she's trying to play off like this centrist moderate type between like the person in the center, which I guess is the most furthest left in this. I don't know what his politics is, but maybe he's just kind of social democrat. I imagine he's got the normal politics of a left-winger of his age. The person on the far end, opposite Piers, I think he's just more of a classical liberal, maybe like a generic conservative. And by generic conservative, I just mean, I've just got to do X, Y, Z, and that's what it means to be a conservative in my own personal life. But there's no systemic issue, which is where I always think conservatives don't do as well. They always talk about personal issues, what I can do in my own life, which is the kind of stoic argument, versus the systemic arguments, which is what the left wing make. And I think they make them quite well. But And I think that's what Andrew Wilson's trying to get to. There's a systemic issue, and then there's the personal issues. And I think he wants to make it systemic, talking about grander themes rather than specific ideals of the show, or whatever. And I've noticed that Tomi Lahren didn't reference the show once. And I know this doesn't bug the audience too much, but it is just one of those things.
I see that as being actually masculine. That's like the man that I grew up with, my dad. But what we're seeing now is these young men who look at Andrew Tate and the Tate brothers, and they see somebody who's just quite frankly a douchebag and disrespects women. And because they've been so emasculated, they're like, oh, great, that's a manly man. But that's not right either. So at some point, I think we'll go back to maybe meeting in the middle here. You can be a man who has feelings and emotions, but you can also go to war and protect and defend your family. I'm hoping we can get back there. But the two extremes right now.
So she's made quite a few arguments there. One, men should defend their family. Two, they should be masculine forever. Two, they should protect and provide, and all the rest of it, which is normal argumentation for what it is to be a conservative, but you got to remember, you got to move with the times a little bit. And I don't mean that in a kind of get more left wing, but I've got to realize it's tougher to be a conservative in the modern day than it was, say, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 80 years ago. And saying that, every generation has to ask the question, what is it to be a conservative? What do we conserve for this generation for the next? And what do we get from the past? Kind of a Burkean sense. But I don't think she made a very positive case. I think that she should have gone for more complementarian argumentations, which probably would have been better there. But yeah, I think Andrew Wilson has just been, you have to acknowledge that, sometimes there are. See, in 2016, there wasn't so much conservative personalities. Now the political market feels a bit saturated. And Andrew Wilson probably sees an opportunity to say, maybe I can nick a bit of our audience. I don't know, I think he just prefers good debating, but, it does get to a point where, some have been there. I mean, she's been there since 2016. I know she had a liberal opinion, but then again, she's a libertarian. And when she talks from a conservative point of view, while holding a lot of libertarian positions, it's like, well, you belong to another philosophical, ideological family, to the conservative.
They're confusing men, and quite frankly, they're leaving women with few choices. And that's the real tragedy here.
You see, I completely agree with you, but Andrew, you were shaking your head quite vigorously. Why?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just more feminine or feminist nonsense, ultimately. And the covert feminism in society is big, especially on the conservative side. So here's what happens, right? Women need to have feminine virtues for men to be pursuing masculine virtues, for you to say things like, well, men, what I want is for men to protect me and I want men to make money. Well, that's great. What that ends up doing is it gives you a set of privilege in society. What do men get? What do men get for doing that for you? What are we getting from women for doing that? Are we getting chaste virgins on our wedding night? No, we're not getting chaste virgins on our wedding night. Are we getting women of great virtue? No, we're not getting women of great virtue. The idea of courtly love is supposed to be done for women of great virtue. Where are they? Well, they're nowhere. And so in modernity, in society, when female conservative influencers say this, it's actually a form of covert feminism. They're saying, I want privilege in society, right? But what is it women are giving to men to get it? What are they giving them? Tell me.
Well,
Piers, can I please chime in here?
Yes, you can. And then James can, and I'll come to you, Sean.
No, I would love to. I love this whole thing of like, if you're a female conservative and you don't believe that men should be douchebags, that all of a sudden you're a covert feminist. Call me a feminist. I really don't give one crap one way or another, but I can tell you this. A lot of these men, these podcast hosts on the right that like to think of themselves as these big masculine men, and what am I getting out of it? I can tell you this.
There's that feminism.
All right, I believe I'm a woman of virtue,
right?
Out. Yeah, there's the feminism. Oh, and then you're interrupting me too,
Didn't
which
take
is great.
long,
I let
did
you
it?
talk.
Didn't take
It's my
long,
turn.
did it?
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to speak over a man?
Yeah, I don't care if you call me. I don't really care if you call me a
strong,
feminist.
independent woman.
Yeah. Yeah. You're actually interrupting me. I didn't interrupt you when you were spewing your bullshit. So now it's my turn. Okay.
You mean the truth?
Like I said before. So I believe I
mean, you can say what you want about Tomi Lahren. She has been very high profile for a very, very long time. And it's become a bit of a issue, I would say. I don't like civil wars. I don't know. I just don't like this. I don't know why. You think you should be able just to debate the issues and blah, blah, blah. But there have been a few social influencers on the right that have been, shall we say, propped up. They've not been as conservative as they say they are, because in their own private life, they're normally much more liberal than you'd otherwise believe or know. That's if you weren't speaking to people. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting the way the route she goes down here. Saying they're talking about toxic masculinity, and I think she came in with the argumentation, well, to not be either. So she's in her view, the ideal man is somewhere between the liberal and the toxic masculinity. Andrew Wilson is saying, well, there's no such thing as toxic masculinity. This is a phraseology by the left. And the kind of behavioral and characteristics of what males do is specifically a gender neutral thing for them, and therefore just shoving toxic on it doesn't make it it doesn't particularly do anything. But I think the better way she could have approached this is to say, well, good question. Then women offer A, B, C, and D, and once again go down the complementarian role. I think she kind of did, but then she got lost, and I think the way she did it in the introductory statement was just to say, toxic males are douche bags or whatever, and ad hominem attacks. To be fair, she was kind of parachuted in by a big firm, by Glenn Beck's firm. She was kind of propped up, and then later on, I think it was The View, we found out she's much more libertarian or left on a few issues than she should be. And I think there's a kind of sense now that authenticity is the order of the day. And if you're not authentic, if you don't actually say what you mean, if you're not as conservative as you're presenting yourself, then why should people view you? Why should people listen to you, etc., etc. And all he's doing is attacking the reputation here a little bit, but it's very rare that you see this type of argumentation being made, at least within a mainstream circle. But if there was ever if there is going to be a civil war, you might as well just get out of the way and get over it as quick as possible.
There we go again. Piers, I'm a woman of virtue. I happen to be independently successful. I have a husband who's not only a former professional athlete, but is currently a professional baseball coach. So is he not a masculine man? I mean, I'm confused here. What's your concept of a masculine man? Mine is a man who respects me.
Yeah, it's not responding to what he was saying. What he was saying was, what do conservative women have on offer? And she says, well, as a woman. Still doesn't answer the question. And, well, is my husband not a masculine man? As my father? What's that got to do with the conversation? He's just put an accusation out to you. He's made a point. He's, I think he explained it all right. And I think she could have dealt with this argumentation quite easily and quite quickly and quite straightforwardly, but for some reason she chose to take in this direction.
Yeah, that misses the point, though. Like, you're still not contending with the argument that I'm making.
What's your point?
I'm saying inside of society, right this second, right, masculinity is not only punished, but also women on the right, covert feminists on the right, are constantly and consistently talking about how they need to have privilege in society. I want men. Their version of masculinity is men who take care of us, men who protect us, men who do all of this. Those are all duties that men have towards women. Great. What are the duties that women have towards men? What are the duties that women have towards anything? What do men get out of this arrangement? What are we getting out of this arrangement? Can you tell me?
I mean,
well,
as I was going to answer a second ago,
I don't want to interrupt you.
Hang on one second. Let Tomi respond.
Most men are born that way.
Let Tomi respond to that, and then I'll come to you, Jez. And then Sean, you've been waiting patiently. So
most men are born to be protectors and providers.
Well, you've just invited it in, haven't you? Because if you say, well, you know, men are born to be X, what do you think is going to be Andrew Wilson's response? I've seen I've moderated way too many debates, but you know, the next response is going to be almost automatic. It's going to be, well, okay, well, if men are born to be X, then what are women born to be? Just that's where the argumentation is going to go. I don't think she's done that many debates with fellow conservatives. I think it probably would have been good for her career, but I just don't see it. Andrew Wilson, I think, does 5 debates per day, but it just seems like Tomi Lahren, I don't know, she doesn't seem to know the Conservative canon that well. It's kind of disappointing. I don't know, it's not very good.
I can't imagine my dad saying, you know what, to my mom, you know what, I'm not going to be a protector and a provider unless you do this.
Men are born to be X. My father, I could never say, me knew from an upper middle class background, with a healthy family unit, which is quite rare today. You have to understand how rare that is. So we do not have the luxury of being a libertarian, a liberal, etc. in this particular moment in time. I think Andrew Wilson's points could have been stronger as well. But we'll see what his next argumentation is.
That's not how real men operate. Real men are protectors and providers, and they marry women who hopefully have some virtue.
Telling us what real men are.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, that was automatically going to be his response, which is, okay, so he's put a point to you. He's asked you 3 times to at least say, okay, well, women can do X, Y, Z.
A lot to the table as well, that are great mothers, great wives, caretakers of the home. There's nothing wrong with being a traditional wife.
Here we go. You can't say that. You can't say that. You can't say, oh, well, you know, men have to do X, Y, Z. And of course, women can be, you know, traditional, optional if they have to. Men have to do X. Women, it's optional if they do X, if they want to, if they choose it. But of course, men, you know, confirmed you have to do this. So there's obligations for men. There's kind of optional extras for women. Yeah, I guess you could be a traditional housewife if you wanted. I guess you could work if you wanted, you know. But you see the opening that she's made there and how Andrew is now going to respond to that.
Wife and mother, you're misunderstanding me if you think that I think that women should just be out doing whatever they want. I think that there are gender roles that should be respected, but I don't think a man needs to get something out of it to be a manly man, a protector and a provider. If you think you need to get something out of it, I quite frankly don't consider you a real man.
Yeah, she have nothing. She have nothing.
But we'll discuss in a moment whether Andrew...
See, she's given definitions for what a real man is. So she hasn't defined what toxic masculinity is, which you have to do. You have to define your terms. I think she's done all right defining what she sees as the ideal man. But, you know, so she would say, well, they have to be providers, protectors, they have to fight off into war and all the rest of it. General conservative, or at least American conservative answers. But I think she's missing like 500 things there. So just be stoic, like, yeah, just use British stoicism. Okay. Maybe British stoicism was going too far. But yeah, not very good debating, I don't think, from Tomi Lahren. I think Andrew Wilson's arguments could have been stronger, but he's still at that point of defining terms, which is what he does.
Andrew Wilson is a real man.
Piers, I offer nothing. I offer nothing.
You offer
sarcasm. It's still not answering the question. What do women provide? Okay, just say women provide A, B, C, and D. This is what conservative women provide. Liberal women offer nothing, and he's trying to stereotype liberal women and shove me into that paradigm, that box. Yeah, I don't think that was good argumentation from her. I don't think it was good argumentation from him particularly. But he just looks good in comparison to weak argumentation.
We a lot of things, Tommy. That's why I always love having you on the show. You know that. Let's go to a real man, James Barr.
Thank you. I do see myself as a man, and I know that you'll be looking at me thinking, well, you're not. You're wearing makeup. You're wearing colourful clothes. Like, look at me. I'm really camp. My nails are painted.
I mean, they are worrying signs.
You're sat there smoking a cigarette.
Once again, define terms. What do you mean by a real man? Well, I consider myself to be a real man. Okay, you're saying what a real man is not, but you're not saying what it is. Oh well, I do, XYZ feminine things, so therefore you might not consider me a real man. Still not defining the term. You're just saying what it isn't rather than what it is. I don't think that we get much out of these. I don't think.
I'd love to get a vape out and start drinking a beer, pints with the lads, just connect with you over that. I think that you have some insane...
So, drinking beer is masculine. Once again, not really defined. Very straightforward in debates. Define your terms and argue your case. And it's equally as important to make sure your opponents are defining their case. And I think Andrew Wilson's caught onto that. You can still see in his face.
Opinions on what women are meant to do for you. It's crazy that you don't appreciate that a woman actually gave birth to you. Like, she gave you a womb for 9 months and then looked after you, I would hope, for the beginning of your life. And you're sat there going, what do women owe men? Women don't owe men anything. No.
Okay, well, he is a leftist. In usual leftist thinking, whether you're a social democrat, democratic socialist, communist, Trotskyist, Maoist, Leninist, every left-winger believes that you owe everybody something. So, I don't know. I think unless he was more like social democratic liberal, maybe. I can't tell where his positioning is. I don't think he knows much about politics. Once again, not defining terms. Once again, not really dealing with the points being made. He's just kind of doing ad hominem attacks. He's insulting his mother. He's insulting probably his wife at some point.
No one owes you anything. You have your own life.
Do you understand that if you make an argument...
So he's an individualist, and then he's saying, well, we actually owe... I think... I'm not sure. I think he's an intersectional liberal. Seems to be where he's coming from, but I don't know that for sure.
And you say that
I'd watch your seminar on how to win an argument.
In a position, if women are supposed to be in a position of privilege where men do A, B, C, and D for them, and then I ask, well, what duties do women have? And you say, well, nothing.
No one said
right?
that
and then
men
you wonder,
need...
why are men checking out? I don't know why men are checking out. I don't get it. That's silly,
so
man.
All right, let me bring it.
So he's brought up the thing, okay, men are supposed to do X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all these things men are supposed to do. See, this is why I think he's the most consistent out of the bunch. At least conservatism has something to say on that, which is, to have an ordered society, everybody owes something. Everybody owes something to your neighbour. You owe something to your family, especially. Conservatives are very pro-family. But Tomi Lahren is kind of an individualist. You kind of like have this liberal intersectionalist, and then you have just generic conservative type.
All right, let me bring in the one person who so far hasn't said a word about this, but has a lot of interesting things to say. Sean, welcome to Uncensored. I think one of the key things of this series that's made it so popular is that anyone who's had young sons knows that they are, if you're not careful, they get exposed to a lot of nasty stuff on the internet. We all know this. And a lot of it is this kind of incel stuff, which I think can be a really malevolent influence on impressionable young men. And they gravitate to it. And I think that partly what Andrew's getting at, I agree with, in the sense that...
Other than the narratives that you're seeing online, what else could it be? I don't hear anybody coming up with problem solution type of phrasing. Kind of, okay, here are the problems that, young adults could be facing, can't able to afford a house. Their material conditions are the worst off they've ever been. A lot of people in, they're either living in cities that are being poorly run by Democrats or the Labour Party, or, they're living in dying towns like the Rust Belt or the north of England. Just there doesn't seem to be much here at all. I just haven't seen much more than... I don't think the argumentation is very good.
Following the Me Too Time's Up campaigns, which were in many ways, extremely laudable, brought down a lot of very bad men, no question of that. But the pendulum swung so wildly that I think a lot of young men in particular felt completely disenfranchised from society, felt like they're all being treated like a bunch of young Harvey Weinsteins unless they could prove otherwise. They didn't really know what the rules of engagement were with women, with teenage girls anymore, whatever. They lost their way. And by losing their way, they gravitated, I think, to very loud voices on the internet like Andrew Tate, who I think, like I say, he says a lot of stuff I find myself nodding to, and then he'll say this misogynist stuff, which I just despise it. I see no reason why you should ever want to have a relationship with a woman the way that Andrew Tate wants you to, where it's just pure misogyny. Just talk to me first of all about why you think young boys, teenage boys, young men, why they've gravitated to people like Tate. Because they have.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I think it's, first of all, we got to understand that we have an amazing responsibility as a parent to lead from the home and to have these open conversations with our young children, all right? Whether they're male children, female children, we have to make sure that we're having open door conversations and we are tackling the hard subjects. Because if we don't take care of everything at home, we don't take care of everything in public, like at school, and other forces within society that help raise our children, we always say it takes a village. Well, it certainly does, but it starts at home. And if you cannot have these open conversations and allow your children to be honest and open with how they are feeling about society and the things that they are seeing, they are going to go to misogyny. They're going to go to the...
So you said, oh, well, these young people, they can feel however they want about society, but they can't do anything about it. They can't provide solutions to it. We just have to listen to them. You need a plan of action to address whatever the problems are. So the housing crisis is still an issue. People don't get paid well. Automation, robotics, AI is on the way. Some people are even questioning whether we will have an economy in the future. Degrees are more or less useless. Jobs for life are few and far between. And even white-collar jobs, blue-collar jobs are absolutely going to get automated. I mean, the first place that was automated is the factory. But now white-collar jobs are seemingly being replaced. So, if you're talking about the future, talk about the future. Say, well, it's not a great time to be a millennial, a Zoomer. It's the first generation ever where the younger generation will not be richer or better off than their parents. The American dream is dead. If there was ever a British dream, that's dead. Britain's been on decline since the days of the Empire. That's not particularly new. But I don't know. Just they're not pointing out the problems, and they're not pointing out any of the solutions. Just say, well, we should listen to them. We should listen to them. Well, what are you listening to? I don't hear him actually address any specific problems. He's saying, well, here's things we do on a personal level as a parent. Well, most parents are overworked, can't have time with their children. They feel stressed out just even having one kid, never mind like more than one. So it's different now. People are more career oriented. Neoliberalism is the order of the day. So, at least in the economy. So, yeah, and what people want is authenticity, community, but you can't have, community in a dying town or, a city where crime's too high, graffiti's everywhere, etc., etc. So, it's like you do have to actually point out the problems, find solutions, and I don't hear any of that from anywhere here. So, yeah.
Andrew and Tristan Tate's the world, and they're gonna learn how to be a man from that, and that is not what society.
Society. Where else were they supposed to go? Were they supposed to go to the left? I don't think they're treated that well on the left. If you're a young adolescent male, if you're a millennial male or a Zoomer male or any of the generations coming up, I don't think that, the centre has been particularly that good. The centre as a political project has just died. It's been hollowed out to the point of not really offering anybody anything. Apart from massive corporations, it's like, well, we don't need any change to the system because we're benefiting from it. And we've monopolised the future. So where else were they supposed to go? And here's the thing. They can't even go to the Republican Party because the Republican Party is still owned by a lot of neoliberals, neoconservatives, rhino types. So they can't join the Democratic Party. They can't join any of the centrist and third parties because, it's a two-party system. So the only party that's left is the Republican Party. And even within the Republican Party, they can only go to particular factions. It can't be a centrist faction. It can't be, it's kind of the Freedom Caucus, MAGA wing of the party. That's the only place they feel they can actually have an outsized voice because they're the most enthusiastic. I don't know if you've noticed, but younger people are voting the Republican Party in higher rates than they've ever done. So when he talks about society, all the society is owned by neoliberals, neoconservatives, kind of the Frankfurt Schooled left, and it's like, where else were they supposed to go? Which is good for us, but it's still not a great place. We should be competing with them. Whatever the liberal or socialist or social democratic solutions are for young males, it won't end up panning out. So the only place that was left was conservative down. So, yeah, still not hearing any solutions. He's not even pointing out the right problems or even asking the right questions. Normally you ask the right question, explore the right question, then try and find an answer to the right question. I don't hear that process anywhere.
It's not what the world needs. That is not masculinity. It is masquerading as misogyny.
How do we protect young men from the easy access at the moment there is to people like Tate? I mean, how do you actually put a ring fence around them so that you can tackle exactly what you've just said, but they're not all...
Tackle what? Be specific. And what do you mean by ring fence? Censorship. In Britain, that means censorship. In Europe, that means censorship. So it's either they're censoring conservatives or they're trying to censor conservatives. They're trying to create a censorship regime. J.D. Vance pointed this out, which I think was very brave of him and very well done. And I think he's absolutely on the right and in the right place in history. And I think for the next phase, that's certainly where we need to be going for our argumentation, because Silicon Valley is going to own everything. So either left-wing bureaucrats or kind of Silicon Valley, libertarian types are going to decide what you think and what you're able to listen to and say and believe and all the rest of it. Yep, techno-feudalism. Or woke corporatism. I don't particularly want any of these options, but, what does the future entail at this point?
Also being dragged into that world.
It's tough because they're growing up in a world we never grew up in, Piers. We didn't grow up with the internet. We didn't grow up with Bumble, Tinder, Instagram, Facebook.
No, I was taught how to treat women by my mother, my grandmother.
Open the door, right?
Aunts,
Open the door.
A lot of strong women in my family, very strong women, and they would just take.
Once again, not dealing with the issue. How old is he? Like in his 60s, 70s, Piers? And back then it was normal to have stable families. You had the mother, father, you had kind of the extended family that got sacrificed through, through our capitalist framework, and then you have the, but there is a right version of capitalism, and there's a really shitty version of capitalism, and I think we're in that rather rubbish version of capitalism where nobody benefits apart from like a few woke rich people, pretending that they're more left wing than they really are. But yeah, him talking about, but he had a family around him. Young lads today, most of them don't know their fathers. Most of them don't live in, stable families. What is he talking about? Oh, well, those women, they used to tell the men what to say and what to say. Who gives it? Once again, he's talking about tough women that he was raised by, and once again, doesn't address the issue.
No crap from the men. So that's the environment I grew up in.
Absolutely. So how do we insulate our children from this? By having conversations, putting parameters around the social media aspects of life and having the conversations at home. Hey, son, hey, daughter, this is what you're going to see out there in the real world. This is what you're going to see on the internet. If you see something like this, that is not how a true man is supposed to act. And hey, that's not how a real man's supposed to treat you.
Right. So
we have to have the conversations.
Yeah. Andrew, do you intrinsically disagree with what?
No offense, but if you're living in a dying town, if there's no future in the economy, if there's no future, who gives a crap if you're a good citizen or, you know, just getting married at all seems like a challenge. Affording a kid feels like a bigger challenge. What are you talking about? This doesn't feel like it's part of reality of most people, specifically the new working class base, which the Republican Party has just taken on. So this generic rubbish conservatism is not fit for purpose. And while I do agree with him in some essence of, you know, you got to be a good dad, good father, good husband, or whatever. More is required. More is required now than ever. And you know, the archetypes of the old era is slowly fading, and we've got to create new adaptable archetypes which can deal with the issues of the day.
You've just heard?
Yeah, I do. I think, again, all of this is always the burden on men. Burden on men. Burden on men. Men need to be doing this.
No, it's a family, Andrew. The family.
Hang on. Let me finish,
family,
man.
Andrew.
Men need to
husband and wife.
Okay, yeah. So let me.
That's not what you just said. Once again, this is how you treat women, and this is how you be. It's just like treat what women? No, just. Most men can't get dates. Most women are going to be, I think, a majority single by the end of the decade, something like that. These are not good times, especially relationship between men and women, and that is kind of spilled over into the conservative movement.
Let me back up. Okay, again, men need to do this. Men need to do that. What I'm talking about is what duties do women have in society? What are the actual women's duties towards men? Everybody is raised from the time they're kids how we're supposed to treat women. We all know how to treat women. We never talk about how men are supposed to be treated. That's almost never discussed, especially by how women are supposed to treat men, what their duties in society are. This has been completely dispelled. Guys like Tate have risen because Christianity itself has become a feminized religion, especially the Protestant sects has become completely feminized. And it didn't used to punish masculinity at all. And now it does. And so where's the alternative? Where's the spiritual alternative? It's nowhere. And we need to get back to this fundamental question of what even is misogyny? Because I don't think that men kicking the crap out of each other, being brutes, you know, insulting each other, hazing each other, even bullying each other is misogyny. Not only do I not think it's misogyny, I think it's perfectly healthy.
Yeah, but I don't think that. I don't think that's misogyny.
Well-adjusted.
Is that the argument?
But that is not misogyny.
Once again, Andrew's a bit of a stickler for defining terms, and the others have not. Now, everyone can say what it's not, but they can't say what it is. Okay, what is toxic masculinity? What is that? You know, I think they can define their terms. I just don't think they're doing a very good job at it. Define your terms, make your case. Jeez, it shouldn't be that hard.
Misogyny.
Well, hang on.
How
women see this is
misogyny is where you have a hatred or, you know, whatever you want to phrase it, towards women. It's not about men treating men.
Sorry, toxic masculinity is what I'm referencing here, and toxic masculinity is what they're claiming leads to misogyny. So what I'm talking about is these are all masculine traits. There's nothing wrong with them, right? When you're talking about misogyny itself, I want to know what that even is. Is it just asserting yourself to women, telling women no, telling them no, that's bullshit?
No, I would say it's okay. Let me
telling
answer
them you're saying stupid things.
Andrew Tate says he's quite open about it. Women should stay at home. They shouldn't go out to work. They should do what he tells them. He's the king of the castle in his house. Blah 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 blah. That is misogyny, isn't it? You know, I've got a daughter. I've got a 13-year-old daughter. I don't want her thinking she can never leave the house. She's somebody's chattel.
It's not never leaving the house. Look, It is true that the world would be a better place if we didn't have it inverted and women did have a natural role at home, and that was glorified, and that there was government propaganda around the nuclear family and keeping women home. Why do you want to outsource the raising of children to strangers instead of your wife? That's a way better society. Why do you want your best and brightest women forced to go to a workplace instead of the best and brightest women staying at home raising their children? That's a way better system. It's always been a better system.
I guess we're talking freedom of choice.
That's not misogyny.
Women to do anything.
It's funny how you just see Tomi Lahren there, just like giving the side eye. But but there has to be a question of what is conservatism, and it's funny that Andrew Wilson, Tomi Lahren especially, what is conservatism? What is female conservatism? Whatever. Or what is traditional conservatism for women? Whatever. Define your terms. It's quite easy. I'm trying to stay neutral in this debate, but it seems like only one is doing it while the others are like, they're saying what it's not, but they're not saying what it is. So I can say you what a cat is not. A cat is not a dog. Yeah, but what is a cat? Define your terms. I don't. It's just whatever.
Anything. It's freedom of choice. It's freedom of choice. I want my.
Oh my God! Just a minute ago, I swear he was just talking about, well, how do we box it in? How do we, keep it like that? He's a pro censorship. Well, there's freedom of choice. Blah blah blah. Well, then isn't it freedom of choice for men to have whatever opinions they want and say whatever they want and do whatever they want? Therefore, he cannot define his terms. So it's just liberalism. It's just a light form of liberalism. Seems everything is form of liberalism these days. Even Andrew Wilson has I don't know. Sometimes I just don't think he offers enough solutions. I don't know. There's no perfect way of debating. I think he's doing enough of what he needs to do, but I just don't think it was enough.
I love the fact that my wife's out there working, teaching kids and building adolescents. I love that. I love that. And to your point about what do I get from a woman? I have a home. I have 3 beautiful children. I have communication in the house. And to me, that means more than anything. Like, I don't understand where I'm not saying you're wrong in your world, but to sit there and say to a woman, what do I get out of this woman? That's treating her like an object.
One thing I want to play clear.
Okay, so it's okay to treat men like objects, give them duties,
I don't
but you're not
feel
allowed
like an
to give
object.
women duties.
I feel respected.
Okay,
in my
well, let me
home.
ask you this.
I'm not
How come
angry
it is
about
in the
it.
United States that men can be drafted? Women can't be drafted, but women can vote to send men to war. 18 years old, they're stabbing each other in the face with bayonets. Women can vote to send men to war that they then themselves do not have to fight. It's a duty that men have, they do not have. What's the counter duty for women? There's no obligation for women to have children. We're well under replacement rate. It's slated 45.
Funny enough, this is one he mentions every single time, which is birth rates, replacement rates, etc., etc. And while he's talking about it, I don't think he talks about it in enough detail. For example, did you know we've been, the world has been shrinking in live births, how many people are born per year, humanity, since 2012. So it's kind of like that film 2012. The world wasn't ending in 2012, but it was the beginning of an end. So I guess the minds were right. It's the beginning of a new cycle. So yeah, we've been in decline. How many people are born in humanity per year since 2012? We've been on the decline since then. And he's just talking about it on the countrywide level, but it's a world problem as well. So I don't think he goes in enough detail. I don't think he goes far enough. I don't know, just whatever. It's good enough for what he's doing.
5% of women will be single in the next 10 years, up to 60% in the next 30. That's the estimates right now. Our replacement rate, we can't even replace.
Yeah. Once again, like they used to say, was it PEE, point, evidence, explain? That's what they used to say in debating, which is make your point, give evidence, explain it well. Define it well if you can, but that's a good point. And I think he completed it well, quite there. I just don't see anything from the others. I don't think it's hard to push back on these points, but I just don't see anything else from anybody else.
Place our own country's birth rates. That's how low they are.
Maybe
this is what we're seeing
people
as
like
a
you
systemic.
that's causing the problem.
Oh my God. You literally have to know nothing to say something like that. It's almost like the Amish. The more conservative the Amish branch is, the more kids they have. The more liberal they are, the more... There was a study done, and I think it was by language. So if you speak Pennsylvanian Dutch, German, and if you have a phone, if you don't have a phone, you're more likely to have 10 kids. But if you speak English and the more technology you use, the less kids you have. So this is easily refutable. It's almost ridiculous just how low level this debate. I think it's just a dumbing down of society, of belief system, of worldviews, and this is kind of what we get. I know it's a bit sensationalist, but just, I don't know.
As a systemic issue inside of society, because nobody will put duties on women.
I knew he'd go to the systemic issue, which is things as a whole, rather than things as on an individualistic basis, like Tomi Lahren was trying to do on, oh, well, my husband XYZ, so therefore, me as a woman, individualistic argument. The husband argument, the father argument, once again, individualistic basis. Their relation to me as an individual. So it's kind of an atomism type style of argument there. The one in the centre, I can't remember his name. He was basically saying, I consider myself a man, but I can't redefine what a real man is, or toxic masculinity. You have to define both terms. You have to define what is a real man, which I think Tomi Lahren kind of did, and what is toxic masculinity. And so he does accept there is such a thing as a real man, even though he's trying to say, well, I won't define it, but just that's everything to them is just blurry lines. Whatever.
Go on,
Instead,
James.
Maybe it's men like you that are making that
maybe that's why
happen.
the
Maybe you're the problem.
rate is low.
Yeah,
It's crazy to me as well that you are just sat here.
Don't talk over each other. Let James speak.
I can't understand why you are sat there confidently thinking of yourself as a victim constantly. You have a platform and you're sat here like, I'm a victim. What are women doing for me? What happened in your childhood?
Well, he wasn't, was he? He was just given the counter argument, and your job is to make the... Yeah, he was given an argument, and your job is to make the counter argument, which he didn't. He just went into ad hominem attacks, and then I don't know, you're a victim. Okay, like the left has never played victim. Okay, whatever.
That has made you so traumatized as an adult that you cannot stand women succeeding. I'm so confused. I feel like Lord. The problem is not, and actually maybe this is our...
Succeeding in what? So his argument... No, agree with it or disagree with it. But his ideal... So Andrew Tate has defined his terms. He's more or less defined what a real man is in his view. He's tried to, muddy the waters on the toxic masculinity thing. Once again, a very good tactic right there. And third thing he tried to do was... actually, he did quite a few things there. But he essentially said to them, oh yeah, and he defined what, in his view, what a real woman was against what a against a more liberalish kind of woman. So he defined himself, what he thought a conservative woman was, what a liberal woman was, no such thing as toxic masculinity, and what a real man was. Tomi Lahren did one, but she didn't do the other three. So you've got to give it hand it to Andrew Wilson. Mind you, he has had more time to talk, so he's able to get his points across. But it seems like the other ones they just did not prepare for this. They must have known that Andrew Wilson was going to argue in this way. I don't know. I don't think his points was that good, but he did define his terms and he did make his case. So he did all the basics of what he meant to do in argumentation.
Fault. Maybe this is the left's fault. Maybe this is modern society's fault for leaving people like you behind. But genuinely, we do not hate men, and toxic masculinity.
So he's admitting that he's left men behind it. Well, isn't that like a... That's kind of caving into the argument. You're kind of saying, well, of course we're to blame, but what? You just surrendered the point. You don't have anything to stand on anymore. Maybe we did actually leave men behind. Okay, well, You just confess to the... it's just an admittance that he agrees with Andrew Wilson. I don't know. Okay, the low standards on this debate.
Masculinity has been thrown around a lot. Ultimately, some of what you're saying is toxic, but that's not because you're a man. That's
some of the things you're saying is toxic. What were they?
Because you're an idiot.
All right.
Ad hominem attack. So you're wrong because ad hominem attack. Okay. Wonderful.
Okay, so just to give you a quick rejoinder here, again, didn't contend with a single argument I made. You just said, why are you acting like a victim? While you're here talking about how women are
You're not
victims.
contending with arguments that other people...
It's wild to me. It's so wild to me.
You know this is Piers' show.
Let me play another clip.
I know this is Piers' show.
Let me go to Tommy. Tommy, I want to play you a clip. This is from a show called Newsnight on the BBC in the UK, where the host, Victoria Derbyshire, had a panel of young men on and asked them, when was the last time you cried? Let's watch this.
When was the last time you cried?
Honestly, the last time I cried, I couldn't tell you.
Same with Leo. I can't really remember the last time that I cried fully.
A lot of times I feel emotion and I look at myself, why can't I cry? We're told to suppress our emotions.
I feel like to guys, we may be treated a certain way that evokes an idea that we have to be extremely strong and upfront and here as a man, and I'm going to be composed at all times.
Now, I've got a slight issue with this, Tommy, in the sense that one of the most devastating moments for me as a movie watcher was watching James Bond blubbing in the last Bond movie. Right? I don't think to prove you're a modern man, you need to be sobbing all the time. You know, I can't remember the last time I cried. It doesn't make me less of a man or less empathetic to people or anything. I just think again, the pendulum issue of what we want men to be, I think we're now trying to persuade a lot of young men, if you're not emoting all the time, then you're being suppressed in some way. We have over here the British stiff upper lip, which I think is a really bad rap. I think it's not a bad thing to actually not over-emote. Your thoughts?
So he's talking about British stoicism, which is different from Athenian stoicism and the kind of American stoicism, which Andrew Tate is talking about. But of course, you've got to realise that Athenian stoicism, Roman stoicism, British stoicism and American stoicism are all variations of things that they are designed to do within that society. While you can say that they kind of come from, the general type of thinkers, Cicero, Marcus Aurelius, other great Athenian thinkers. It's a type of stoicism, but then again, you're pushing Andrew Wilson into a corner because as a conservative, you've kind of got to defend stoicism, not because it's the best system, just because it's the most optimal system or the most conservative one you can possibly reach. But, so the things that Andrew Wilson believes a lot of it did come from British stoicism, but British stoicism was built upon the idea that, we're the final completion. We just got to stick with it, and this is it forever now. We're done. Kind of like a end of history. This is it. But of course, it's never it. So even stoicism is involved, and it'll be quite interesting making a video on that one day, but I guess not today.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's...
Sorry, Sean, I'll come to you. That was for Tommy. I'll come to you in a minute, Sean.
Oh, sorry, Tom.
For Tommy.
Sorry.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all, Piers. I don't think that men should be trained to be overly emotional and that should be a sign now of new maturity, being emotional. I don't agree with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with men crying in certain circumstances. Listen, everybody has a different journey. Everybody has a different set of circumstances. There are circumstances wherein men crying I have no issue with. It's also not up to me to tell a man when he can or cannot cry. I personally prefer the men...
Once again, you're the conservative. Yeah, there are kind of obligations upon you, emotionally, towards the economic system, towards the social system, etc. I'm not sure how Tomi Lahren is a conservative. I'm not sure what conservative opinions she actually holds, which is kind of since we're in the era of authenticity when it comes to social media influencers, but of course she was propped up by the Blaze and fired by Glenn Beck after she said had a liberal social opinion or something. I can't remember, it's been so long. But she was very popular in 2016, where she was needed at that point. And of course, I always like it when we have multiple voices for either the Republican Party or the Conservative movement. I just think it's helpful overall to get, through a particular narrative. But we're starting to come to the era of authenticity. Your persona has to match you on a personal level in some regard. But whatever, I don't know.
And in my life, not to be overly emotional, but that's just a personal preference. Really, who am I to tell a man how he should exhibit his emotions? But
libertarian, once again. You should say, in general, conservatives believe in stoicism, and we believe it to be an optimal philosophy for dealing with issues within your life. But even stoicism isn't always enough. So I think there's different ways you could have argued this, but I don't think she's done very well here.
But again, I think that there is two sides here that are both too extreme. You've got the one hand that wants
trying to be a centrist. And this is the problem, which is, I don't know, she's trying to moderate her persona a bit, but once again, she hasn't defined what toxic masculinity is. I think she did a little bit, but she didn't touch upon it too much. She certainly didn't adjust her opinion to Andrew Wilson's argumentation, so he hasn't had to play much effort. She hasn't had to challenge him too much. I don't know, he just hasn't been challenged at all. I haven't seen it.
Men to be feminine and cry and show their emotion and be weak. And then you've got the other side that says you cannot cry, you must always be strong, and you should look at women as an object. So again, there's got to be a happy medium here. I think there once was, but now...
Well, that's what libertarianism is, and you're the libertarian. Libertarianism does see people as objects. They see them as economic units to be used within the whatever economic system it is. It's materialism, ultimately. It's all right if you are a materialist, but just defend it. Just say, yes, I am a materialist, I am a libertarian. I believe in self-interest. I believe in rationalistic egoism or whatever it is. And Don Tootin, I'm a objectivist, libertarian, anarcho-capitalist, and I believe in the capitalist system. That's my worldview. And social conservatism comes beneath the economic system of the day. But Andrew Wilson is trying to say, well, the social conservatism is better than the economic system of the day. Which, funny enough, goes back to the fusionism era, which is kind of dead at this point. And the fusionism era was neocons, the foreign policy people, the economic people, libertarians, classical liberals, free markets, for a free world, and the social conservatives. And it seems like the only branch that's still standing is the social conservatives with any meaningful influence. And of course, the tech right are new, and you can't put them in either camp. They do kind of care about economics, but not really. They're almost technocratic in what they believe. I don't know. I'll do a further analysis another day.
Now, because of, again, I agree, there was an overreaction of the feminist movement to make men weak. I don't agree with that either.
Yeah.
I just wish we could come to a place where there was a happy medium, where people could just be human beings who could have a gender role but weren't married to that gender role and absolutely.
People could have a gender role but weren't married to that gender role. The culture war that is currently presently ongoing is, what is a woman? Now, the debate seems to have shifted a little bit into what is the role of men and women. And this is the next phase of the culture war. And then there's a phase after that, etc., etc. But this is where the debate was always going. I think it was kind of predictable that the culture war was going in this direction. So, yeah, this will be interesting to see how it goes.
Absoluteness. There's got to be a place for that. I would certainly hope.
Yeah. Andrew Wilson, when was the last time you cried?
When I had a death in my family.
And how long ago was that, if you don't mind me asking?
Many, many, many years. Many years. I don't know, maybe a decade, something like that.
Right. So you haven't shed a tear in a decade?
I don't think so, no.
Would you see it inherently as a weakness in a man to over-emote?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Men, listen, you don't want men to fall to pieces in crisis. You're the head of a family. You're the head of your household. And also you're the heads of nations. You have a moral obligation not to fall to pieces. In fact, I would say you're duty-bound not to. You need to be able to control your emotions, and you need to be able...
So he does show some emotion. He says, even within the Stoic framework, there are exceptions to the rule, so you can... but it still kind of proves the rule. But in general, yeah, I mean, if the threshold is to a certain degree, then yes, you're allowed X emotion, but it's more systemic in the emotional arena. So yeah, it shows he does have some emotion, because he does cry with the death in the family or something. It's weird. I didn't, but yeah, it's good. It's good that it shows emotion now and again. I don't particularly see the point of it, because it doesn't really change anything. But I know people like to get emotional at particular times in their lives, and you got to respect that.
Able to attempt to control them at all times. It's not to say that you're not going to lose control. Nobody's perfect. But I think that the idea of the Stoic man is a much better prospect for the idea of like this leftist that I'm arguing with next to me on the panel. I would not want to be that guy, that person who just cannot control their internal emotions. They can't do it. And unfortunately, again, this is through the viewpoint of the feminine prism that it's only through empathy, right? Empathy first. And it's like, no, it's not always about empathy. It's also about reason. It's also about logic. It's also about understanding that we live in a carnal world full of warring tribes who are always killing each other. And that's part of the human condition. You can't afford to have your men losing control to emotion or to empathy.
James, when was the last time you didn't cry on a date? Let's flip the question.
You know, it's funny, this is the great contrast he's trying to make between conservatives and those on the left of conservatives, which is the left kind of have this negative stereotype now that they're all, you know, crying, emotional, wailing, overly yelling and moaning about, you know, they haven't talked about their favorite pronouns or whatever. You know, every man is a Bernie bro, every, you know, left-wing female is a green-haired feminist with big glasses or something. And it's kind of interesting to see how the stereotypes and archetypes have evolved, and this is how he's trying to do it. And as soon as he says, well, you don't want people to be emotional, the person in the center then just gives a big emotional response. She just looks, I don't know, like bored or irritated. And he's just like, I don't even know what that face is. He always looks confused, or like, what are you talking about?
I haven't cried
Sometimes you can just
today.
tell what people think about it.
But I did cry yesterday, and I think it's okay to cry. And it's funny that you keep trying to goad me and saying that I don't have control of my emotions. I think I have incredible control over my emotions because I know what's upsetting me and when, and I'm able to talk about it.
Well, how often do you cry?
I mean, not all the time, but
every day?
No, not every day, Piers. I cried
Two or
yesterday.
three times
I probably
a week?
haven't cried for about 3 weeks before that. But honestly, my therapist tells me I need to cry, and it's a good relief.
But the point being, Andrew hasn't cried in 10 years.
I think that is such a weakness, Andrew, that you haven't cried in a decade. Like, that's crazy.
Amazing.
You told me I could cry.
I'm so worried about you. I can't understand. Well, you're crying now, and please don't have.
My therapist give me permission I can
that for
cry.
you.
I think we're seeing the two extremes that Tommy was talking about.
It's honestly, yeah, Tommy, you're so right. There's no nuance. I mean, it's difficult to have nuance on this show anyway, but we do need to find some in this debate.
I think the point is, men should not feel they can never emote, but also they shouldn't be encouraged to believe if they're not constantly emoting. There's something wrong with them.
Well, of course, but also
that's where the pendulum's just gone too far.
You are also sort of guilty of this manosphere, Piers. You're very much in the manosphere yourself.
What do you think that means?
Well, it means that you think James Bond shouldn't cry, and that if he does, that's a weakness.
I want James
that's
Bond
not
to
true.
be. I want him to seduce women.
Which he
I want
does.
him to be a ruthless, steely-eyed dealer of death to bad guys.
But also,
I want him to have a cigarette.
So you're a part of the manosphere if you're against James Bond crying in a fictional movie. Okay, well, at least he's come up with a definition of toxic masculinity now. There you are. If you're against James Bond crying in a fictional movie, then you're part of the manosphere. Well, at least we're getting our definitions right.
with his whiskey or his shaken lobster.
This is making
maybe Andrew is your type.
And I don't want him sobbing like a baby all the time. I don't.
Like Tommy might not.
Because guess what? When you're in Her Majesty's Secret Service, you don't have time to cry all the time.
Very sad news about Her Majesty Piers. Sadly, she did pass away, and I'm sure you cried at that, which is completely
His Majesty
right.
now, obviously.
Tommy,
actually, the last Bond film was under Her Majesty, so I was correct.
Fine, great fact checking.
I don't know if Americans quite understand that, but it's generally a joke within Britain that, especially if you're upper middle class, that every upper middle class person in Britain wants a knighthood. So if you just suck up to the royals enough, then hopefully you'll get one. And it's an internal joke. I don't think the Americans really get it, but it's kind of like, oh, of course I cried. It's the Queen. Right? Have I got a knighthood yet? Nope. Oh, well, of course, Diana was the greatest princess of our generation. It's kind of, it's all fake, But,
Tommy.
I don't think I'm getting knighthood now. Although, one of my relatives used to be a lord, so that was generations ago. He outfound the Conservative and Liberal parties, believe it or not.
You would obviously like to go out with a man like you then, because you don't think it's okay for a man to cry.
Well, she has excellent taste.
But there are other women who do like a man that cries. Like, we're not all the same. We don't all require the same type of man. So it's fine if we all want...
Actually, that's proven untrue. I think what he's talking about is kind of like this metrosexual male, kind of urbanized, in touch with his feelings. Women are repulsed by that for some reason, as most statistics have shown. So that's not true at all. I'm not saying everyone has to be absolutely stoic, because there's different types of stoicism. But, so you're just going to make a choice for yourself. Well, no, there is a minimum standard to things, isn't there? There is kind of like stuff you have to do in society in order to exist in it. And there's things you need to do and things you want to do. And I think if you just know where the minimum standard is, then I think you'll at least use that as a start. But some people can't even get to the minimum standard, so...
want to be different types of men, but there shouldn't be one rule for all men, and that's the problem.
All right, let me bring Sean back in and bring it back to adolescence, because this series has blown up worldwide. It's got incredible numbers of people watching, talking about it, debating. A lot of parents thinking, what should they do if they have a young teenage boy? And I saw it, as I say, with my three sons, the Jonathan Haidt book about cell phones, from 2010, when phones became smartphones. Basically, young people's brains started scrambling, and they've carried on scrambling ever since. That doesn't help. I think a lot of the issues that young men face.
Once again, Piers, he won't come out and say it, but he's almost pro-censorship. It's kind of like, well, of course, if it wasn't for the internet and mobile phones and computers, then, young people would be all right. I get hiccups. I guess if you're in Britain, you're a bit more sensitive to this kind of debate, and you've kind of heard these talking points. If you're American, maybe you're a bit more newer to them. But these are pro-censorship arguments. If you've been here long enough, you kind of, he doesn't outright say it, but that's kind of where he's at. And he's got a lot of friends on the left in Britain, and I don't know why, but he's got an over obsession with keeping them as part of his inner circle. So. Whatever.
Are driven by stuff they see on their phone.
I agree. I mean, for this specific instance, my wife and I were waiting to give our children phones until at least 8th grade, right? At least 8th grade. We want to monitor what they're seeing and what they're being filled with, right? Because again, they're subject to search engines. They hear things at school, then they go home, they search it on their phone. They search it in their room, and now they're wide open to this world that they don't need to be a part of because their brains haven't fully formed yet. They're still little. My son's almost 12, right? I got to be very careful of what he puts in his mind. And social media, for the things that we are doing as adults, yeah, it's pouring into our household and we're doing well with it. But for an adolescent, like these young kids, I'm seeing kids at dinners when we're at restaurant surfing TikTok while their parents are not even paying attention to what they're doing. Like that right there is a massive problem. And if we don't, as a society, get a hold of that, then this.
Well, if that's the problem, and society should get a hold of that, what's the solution? Is it pro-censorship? Probably. Who knows? Maybe it's just a coincidence. That's what they're all. Oh, but it's all free choice. But, you know, society ought to, you know, censor and, you know, just stop people from getting information that they like. And, of course, we should let the government and, you know, the big corporations decide what information we receive. I'm not freedom of speech absolutist, but you kind of know, especially Europe, if you kind of know what direction they want to take society in, and I don't trust these people to, you know, create laws censoring speech.
This will never end. There will be more series like Adolescence that hit even harder because we're witnessing it in our own lives.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew, you seem to be in agreement with some of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's poison. There's no doubt. It re-scrambles children's brains, and it's very difficult to monitor. Even if you have parental controls, they can find ways around it. At school, they have, you know, peers who will assist them in getting around it. You have to monitor it really well. You know, smartphone technology for my own kids, it was kind of new. I wish that I, in retrospect, had done more guarding against that myself. You don't know the dangers of that technology until children get a hold of it, and then you're left scrambling going, oh man, I wish I had known that this was going on or that was going on, but you have no idea. Now, though, we have a little bit of retrospect, and we know that it's an appropriate thing to do to guide against this type of technology because, yeah, he's absolutely right. It does create all sorts of problems for kids. I'm not sure that gets to the heart of the masculinity and feminine issue, but I totally agree with him that we should be safeguarding our children against this technology. It does seem to be very bad for them.
And you know, James, there is pretty well unfettered pornography on the internet available to young men and women, obviously, but you know, men are watching a lot of often quite violent, degrading, sexual scenes in these porn clips they're seeing online. None of that can help in the way they.
You know, if you want to ban something, ban OnlyFans. That'll do more for, you know, men's mental health than anything else.
An impressionable young male mind goes about trying to forge a real relationship with an actual woman.
Well, I think it's important not to say young male mind. It's any person's mind, right? Like, I don't think we should victimize men. I can't believe Andrew's agreeing with me. But yeah, it's awful. I mean, I genuinely don't think people should have phones until they're 16. They certainly shouldn't have social
Well, Australia's done that, and I'm not against it. The smartphone ban till 16.
I mean, it's terrifying.
Why not?
You can't go on air, on TV, and say whatever you want. Like, I know you're pretending that you're uncensored, but you couldn't sit here and say literally whatever you want.
Yes, I can.
Well, not really, Piers, because if you said something that incited hatred or racism or a terror attack,
I wouldn't want to
you would
say
be arrested.
I wouldn't
but online,
why would I want to incite a terror attack?
I'm not saying that you want to. I'm just trying to make a point. Online,
you're saying I can't say what I want.
Online,
I do not want to incite a terror attack.
No, but if you did,
I'm allowed. Just to be, you're raising an interesting point about censorship.
Yeah,
we're uncensored because I would not want. I don't say anything I don't want to say.
Right.
So when you say I'm censoring, I'm actually self-censoring.
The censorship regime in Britain is ridiculous. It's way over the top. I'm not saying there shouldn't be any rules, but you know, but I'd prefer no rules to the kind of rules that we're heading into.
I'm not going to call for a terror attack.
I'm not saying that you would ever do that, of course, but I'm saying that if you did, there would be accountability for that because you are broadcasting to a lot of people.
Right.
But a lot of people online do not have that gate stopping them from saying horrendous things, and so therefore it can blow up online, excuse the horrible pun, and that shouldn't be allowed. There should be a system in place that stops people broadcasting things that aren't meant to be broadcast to millions of people.
One of the problems, Tommy, Toby Young, who's a British journalist, director of Free Speech Union, very, very big in promoting and defending free speech, says Adolescence, the new teen drama, is pro-censorship propaganda, partly paid for by the state. It is now being seized upon by Labour left-wing MPs as evidence we need more online censorship. And that is, of course, you know, you talk about a swinging pendulum. What you don't want to come out of all this is an overreaction and an over-censorship, because that in itself becomes a problem.
Yeah, 100%. And I agree with Sean on this point, too. I think parenting has more to do with this than any of us really, can even understand. I mean, many, I'm sure, in this panel can. But parenting is, to me, the end-all, be-all of all of this. I mean, you can watch horrible things online. You can listen to people say horrible things. But if you've got a good foundation with good parents at home, hopefully, too, that provides you with a lot of guidance and support to navigate.
She could have added in a bit of a thing there with a caveat, if, which is pretty rare in society, just give a comment like that. It just draws in the conversation. It makes it a bit more in depth. It just adds a bit more to it.
These things, and it doesn't really, scramble your mind in the way that those that are not blessed with a two-parent household may be impacted by it. I don't believe that censorship is ever the answer. I believe that more speech is the answer to speech that you don't like. And as much as I don't like certain people online and what they say, whether they're the Tate brothers or whoever else, I believe that they should have the right and the ability to say it. And then people like us should have the right and ability to respond to it. I think that's the healthiest way to come to a great consensus, or at least a public square where we can all debate ideas with dialogue and conversation. But I don't think that censorship is ever the answer. And I think that, our leaders in America have done a great job of emphasizing that, especially to the European countries who believe censorship is the way to cleanse or the way to legislate morality. I just don't think that's...
Half of America believes in that too. She is incredibly naive. Yeah, half of the country would censor you if they could. I don't know. It seems like she doesn't have an in-depth idea of what the Monday left is. I don't know. These seem like Reaganite talking points. They're not very good.
That's the way to do it.
Well, the instinctive reaction, certainly in the UK, for a long time now, many years, has been to censor and to ban and prohibit and so on. And I think people are beginning to wake up to the downside of that, is that once you give away, once you chip away at things like freedom of speech, freedom of expression, you're heading down a pretty slippery road, which can be dictated by...
Free speech is only there for those that you disagree with. It's not there for those that you do agree with. And the left absolutely should never, ever, ever define what free speech is. Neither should the centre.
Your government, and then that's not a place.
It's interesting though, isn't it? I mean, I just want to make a side point, and I don't need to get into it, but like your government are banning books, so they are literally talking about free
I mean, that's a false equivalent if I ever heard one.
Speech, whilst also banning free speech in it that they don't agree with. So what you're saying is nice, and I agree with you.
Arresting grannies for praying in their own house versus, banning a pornographic book. It's not the same thing. And even saying that is kind of sneaky. It's very, very sneaky. It's fair game. I'm just saying it's very sneaky.
In
Porn
principle,
from children's
but that's not
libraries is
what
not
is
the same as banning books.
You talked about freedom of speech, right? And everyone coming together and having a discussion about it. But that's not what's happening.
Yeah, but
Putting
we're talking
graphic
about in the
gay
home,
porn
not in
into
school.
children's libraries is a little different.
I mean, no one should be putting porn into a children's library. I think we all agree on that.
Then why?
Yeah, exactly. What's your point?
Why are you complaining that that's being
Because that's
banned?
not what I'm discussing. I'm discussing books that talk about diversity, equality, that talk about Black Lives Matter, that talk about gay pride. Like this is...
So I don't have the same take as the rest of the panel when it comes to the idea of legislating morality. I think that there are ideas which are subversive and that we can get rid of, and that's absolutely fine to do. I don't think that we need to have unfettered access to pornography. I don't think that we need to have unfettered access to...
He's defending pornography. Just like, what do you mean? Just, did you see his face then? Okay, yeah, we'll just ban pornography. He was agreeing with it like 5 minutes ago. Just wonderful. Great consistency in their debating tactics.
Children being introduced to this type of sexuality so young, I don't think that that's necessary at all. I don't think it's an impingement on free speech at all. And not only that, there's going to necessarily be limits on every single freedom that we have. By necessity, that's the way it has to be, unfortunately. And the reason it has to be that way is because otherwise you're going to have nothing but subversives who go in and subvert your entire culture, which is exactly what happened in the UK, and it's exactly what's been happening in the United States. So we have to have some way to fight back against that.
All right. Sean, final word to you.
I just feel like, you know, raising children is a multi-pronged approach, right? I mean, you're looking at first in the house, then you're looking at the schools, you're looking at the government, you're looking at extracurricular activities with coaches, et cetera, and different people that have their hands on the child. I just think it's important to be at home having these open conversations, right? What this drama series did for me was already had this shining light on a subject, but made it even brighter. Like, I need to open the door and talk to my child. You know, I need to talk to my son. I need to talk to my daughter to see what's going on in the world, right? Because if I don't know what's going on, then I can't help them navigate what's going on in society.
But I think, you know, it's interesting. It's been a fascinating debate. I just think if...
Specifics, what would you do to reform society? Nothing? Anything? Oh, this is great.
You don't know that your child is going down rabbit holes like that kid is in that series for that length of time, then it comes to Tommy's point, is you're failing your parenting. That is a fundamental part of parenting, is you're supposed to be protecting these impressionable young minds as best you can. If they're spending hours after hour every day, you know, watching and viewing incredibly disturbing content that fries their brains and makes them do stuff they wouldn't otherwise have done, you are failing as a parent. And one of the biggest issues in the world right now is a general sense of a lack of accountability for parents. They're the first feckless parents to blame everybody else. It's the government's fault, it's the police fault, it's the social workers' fault, it's the school teachers' fault, etc., etc. It's never their fault. And actually, if you just start by saying, actually, we should have done more as parents, that is a good message to send everybody. We could probably all agree on that. Great discussion.
Absolutely.
Great discussion. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Piers Morgan Uncensored is proudly independent. The only
I love generic conservative. You're just like, stand up straight, know your manners. Don't get me wrong, I prefer generic conservative to any of it, but it's like everything they speak is a talking point. It's like, I think you have to wind them up just to make sure they say the right thing. Okay. Do they have any thoughts of that? I don't know. So yeah, I think next video I might do the one where this kind of debate about the Netflix show kind of sparked the debate between Megyn Kelly and Matt Walsh, and then Pearl and the other social media personalities got involved. So yeah, I might do that next. It's kind of interesting, but once again, I'm not a fan of Civil Wars, but feels like this is just showing the chasm that has opened, or maybe it just be like some of these conservative personalities that we've propped up are actually more to the left than they're saying there are, or maybe even be centrists. But you know, their personal views are matching their persona type views. Well, I don't mind that per se. It seems in the age of authenticity that can't last. All right, so yeah, that was the debate. I didn't think it was a very good one, but at least it's getting discussed, and you have different people of different views discussing these the topics of the day. So yeah.